Welcome to Women Who Move Nations, a podcast by the Public Transport Association, Australia, New Zealand. Each episode, we interview top female executives from the public transport sector in Australia, New Zealand, and around the world. If you're interested in leadership, workplace gender equality, or building clean, green transport for the future, this is the podcast for you. This season is proudly sponsored by NEC Smart Transport Solutions. Find out more at nec.com.au. Now here's your host, Michelle Batsis.
Hello and welcome to our next episode of Women Who Move Nations. I'm your host, Michelle Batsis, and today I'm very, very excited to be interviewing our special guest, Cassie Hames, who is the programmer at Sage Automation. She is driving amazing technology innovation in public transport. So welcome, Cassie. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so we'll get started and, always like to start with our guests sharing a bit about their career journey. So if you could just talk us through what has been your journey, what has shaped you in terms of the professional skills and interests that you have.
Yeah, so for me, my vision began to deteriorate during high school, and it certainly brought a lot of uncertainty because, things were rapidly changing and wasn't sure what I was going to do for a career. I knew I wanted to get into IT, but outside of that, what focus area, I wasn't sure. So I started studying at TAFE University. And the problem with having a vision impairment, and I think being female as well, is you get, a lot of harassment and discrimination. And, I received that even studying. So, I had a uni lecturer, because I was the only female in the class. And this uni lecturer, he knew that I couldn't see certain colours on the whiteboard. So he'd always use those colours, even though, I had a disability action plan that said only use like black and blue. So he'd use, red and green. And then, because I was female, we also had the sexual harassment comments as well. And I even had an educational manager. We were having a discussion and I said, I want to move into programming. And he goes to me, "You're making the wrong decision. You should be working in a factory." And that crushed me at the time. I went home and was just crushed. And then I went, well, screw him. I'll prove you wrong. I've been a programmer for over 15 years now. So I think I've definitely proved him wrong. But, you had to have that internal determination, because it didn't matter how much I was telling him about, we have different assistive technology and that sort of thing. He didn't care. Like, as far as he was concerned, people that have low vision were meant to work in a factory. And throughout the career journey so far, there's still that, I think, stigma of, what people think you can and can't do. So, I think a lot of where I've come from is just from that determination of going, well, you don't think I can do that? I'm going to show you that I can do it and take it to a whole nother level. It's certainly challenging at times, but, I've learned a lot of cool things because of it as well.
Hey, I'm so sorry to hear that, though. It's just so unacceptable you've had that experience, really. So, Cassie, in terms of where you are now, could you just share a little bit about your role and the inspiration that you've had to move into this space around accessibility solutions, particularly for public transport?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do, I'm inspired by is from lived experience. As someone, I have a cane, I use a screen reader. My world is very different to that of someone that's sighted, able-bodied, that sort of thing. I'm constantly having to create workarounds to do the same thing as what, someone else can do. So, a lot of my, I guess, work is inspired from that and going okay, well, here's the challenge we've got. How can we fix that so that we can all use it? I'm a big believer that no one should be left behind, and try and push that in whatever project we're working on within the team, to be going hey, have we thought about this use case, that use case? Because so often accessibility can be an afterthought, whereas it should really be at the beginning of that project. because whatever change gets made usually can benefit everyone. Like, it's not just for the vision impaired community or whoever. We can all benefit from these different changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to someone just yesterday actually about accessibility and that lived experience, and user-centered design needs to be from the start, not bolted on at the end. Thank you for sharing that. So if you kind of reflect on your career progression, what have been some of those pivotal challenges? I mean, you've talked to them, but I mean, how have you kind of overcome that as well? How have you approached that?
Yeah, so people's perceptions is certainly like one of the challenges. And you have to, I guess, almost be vulnerable and challenge their perception as well. And look, some people don't want to hear it. Once they've got their mind made up, that's it. And some of the perceptions come from things that they've seen in movies or read, or like they're just unrealistic. But that's their perception, and they're stuck on it. And like I go to different presentations and things and talk about my story and go, well, like, yes, I can't see clearly, but look what else I can do. Like I have different skill sets because of my disability. Like I think about things differently because I've got to constantly try and find that workaround. But I think another, I guess, challenge has been myself. So the internal pressure that I put on myself to try and keep up with people who are sighted is crazy. And I'm learning to, I guess, tame that down. But to give you an example, so at the start of last year, I was still doing everything at work through magnification. So my screen was heavily magnified. So if you could imagine your desktop, that little start icon in the bottom left-hand corner, when I'm zoomed in, that's pretty much all you can see on my screen. Is just that like little icon, which on my screen looks massive. So to try and do anything visually was quite tiring. I'd get through a day of work, I'd then go home and I'd need a nap. And then I'd get up, have some dinner, go to exercise, whatever it might be. And then I'd need to sleep again for another like 10 to 12 hours to try and recover for that next day. And at the start of last year, I'm going, I don't know that I can keep doing this. I wasn't recovering enough, and just, I was exhausted all the time. And I had a workplace assessment. So someone comes in and reviews, how are you working and what technology could be used instead. And before he even came to the workplace, we had a conversation on the phone, and he goes, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. And I'm going, oh, okay, bracing myself sort of thing. And he goes, you're going to have to learn Braille if you actually want to continue to do what you're doing. Now, I'd dabbled in Braille a number of years ago because I started to learn it so that I could tell the difference between a male and female toilet sign, because visually the images look very similar. I couldn't tell the difference. So I thought, well, if I learn what is female and what is male in Braille, I'll at least be able to like tell, okay, like, oops, no, this is the male one, don't go into that one, and then try and find the female one. So yeah, when this worksite assessment's like, you need to learn Braille, it's like, oh, am I ready for that challenge? And I had to sit with that for a moment and process that. And then I went, yes, no, I am ready for that, because I need to do something differently in order to continue doing what I enjoy doing. I now do my work through listening to a screen reader on my computer and doing a combination of Braille as well. And what a difference that made. And I wish I'd done it earlier, but I had to get out of my own way to actually do that.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for sharing that personal story as well, around how you've kind of managed some of those challenges for yourself. So, Cassie, I want to talk more now around like your current work. And I know you have developed this amazing bus hailing app technology that really has the power to transform how people with vision impairment can access transport to get to places where they need to go. But I'm aware as well, this kind of technology can definitely have a broader application, right? So could you share with our audience, what is the See Me app and what is its role in improving public transport accessibility?
Yeah, so the See Me app has been created out of years of frustrations of being left behind at a bus stop. So to give you an example, I can stand at the bus stop, but I can't actually see if a bus is coming, and if it is a bus, what bus number is it? And so what I do is hold up a sign in the hope that, the bus will see it and will pull over to let me get on. And I was finding that that wasn't always happening. So then I started wearing a high vis, bright orange vest as well while holding a sign, which is a really humiliating thing to do on a daily basis, starting your day, on a main road, holding a sign, you're a target for people driving past. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better way. Because, every time I catch up with friends, we'd be talking about, oh, I waited at the bus stop for an hour, no bus pulled over, but the bus should have been there at that 20-minute interval. And I initially thought, well, what if I created an electronic sign and made it bigger? And then I realized, well, that was only going to potentially help me, whereas this was, an issue faced by a lot of people. And so that's how See Me came about. I thought, well, what if you could indicate to the driver ahead of time that, hey, I am waiting at this bus stop, please pull over and pick me up. But then not only that, when you're on the bus, to also be able to go, I want to get off at this destination stop, and for the bus driver to be notified and for you to be notified. Because one of the challenges of catching buses or public transport as a vision impaired person is you can't see where you are on your journey. So, you try and, have different points to remember, so one of my bus trips, I know that after the second roundabout, I need to press the button. But if that bus makes a detour, I'm going to miss that and then end up somewhere completely different. So with the See Me app, you can select your pickup stop, the pickup bus service, as well as your destination stop. And what happens is, as the bus is departing from that stop prior to the one you're at, you get notified in 3 different ways. So you get notified visually, through vibration, as well as it speaks to you to say bus is approaching. Meanwhile, on the bus driver also gets notified because it rings the onboard bus bell system to say, hey, you need to pull over at the next stop. And then again, the same thing when you're on the bus, as the bus is approaching your destination, you get notified in those 3 ways, as well as the driver as well. So you don't have to worry about finding that stop request button. You can sort of enjoy the journey a little bit more. And the great thing is, this isn't something that can just be useful for people who are vision impaired. It's got so many different use cases, and I've spoken to parents, they're like, oh, this would be great for my kid, and that sort of thing. This is what's great when you put accessibility from the start. It has so many different use cases and can help a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I love that you talk about the broader application, but also just kind of how practical and logical this kind of technology is, right? So it's so great that you're leading this work. In terms of kind of the technology going forward, and we know it's all evolving at such a rapid pace, what do you see in terms of what's coming, or what the opportunities are in terms of accessibility for passengers?
Yeah, I'd like to see in the future more real-time information. For example, is the bus that you want to catch, how full is that? Am I actually going to be able to get onto that bus, or is that bus going to drive past because it is full and at capacity? Imagine if, it was able to tell you that, okay, there's 2 wheelchair spaces still available on the bus, or there's no spaces available on the bus for wheelchairs. To have that information ahead of time helps you plan your journey, because there's nothing worse than when you're standing at the bus stop and the bus goes past and you don't know why. Is it because it's full? Is it, because they haven't seen you? I think we could do so much more with that real-time information, to give people ahead of time, so then they can make adjustments to their day based on that. If I know that the bus is going to be full, well, maybe I'll look at, going to a different stop to pick a different bus route to go where I need to go. Or maybe I'll catch an Uber or a tram or train. Just having that information, I think, really just helps with that journey planning. But I'd also like to see improvements around safety. I think we've still got a long way to go with improving safety on public transport. And I know there's a push trying to get people to catch public transport, but I don't think we're still addressing this issue of safety. So for example, like I've got many probably examples of issues I've had on public transport, but I've been verbally abused on public transport. I've been followed after getting off a bus and a tram, and I had to find a different way to get rid of them. You have people that like having a go at you or bashing windows and things, and there's no discreet way to try and get help. If you've got someone having a go at you, I can't just get my phone out and call, like transit police or whatever, because that's going to aggravate that person even more. You're relying on, the driver or other passengers to hopefully like put an alert out or something. But that doesn't necessarily happen because they don't want to get involved, and for them to be under fire. Safety at the bus stops, they're very dark. You have people, I've had someone that was hiding behind a shelter. I was standing at the bus stop. He was behind a shelter. I think he was drunk, but he was yelling abuse and then throwing things at me. And it's like, what do you do? There's nothing to go like, hey, I need help. And because it's dark, there's no visibility there. And if something was to happen like to me, if I got asked, well, what did the person look like? I can't give an accurate description of that, because I can't tell the difference necessarily in colours. I can give a spectrum of colours and go, oh, they might have been wearing a red or orange or brown shirt or whatever it be, but I can't go, oh, yeah, they've got this, feature about them or whatever. So I'd like to think and hope that, technology around safety could help. But I think as well, notifications, like if we're moving like a stop or your bus service or whatever has been like moved or rescheduled or whatever, to be notified of that via like SMS or email to go, oh, stop 1 is closed due to construction and it will be closed for the next 2 weeks. I know we put up signs at stops to let people know, but that only works if you can see it. Also, if people haven't stolen that sign, it's not really getting that message out across to all the users. And if you don't frequent that stop every day, you might not know, and then you think you can catch the bus at stop 1 and you can't because the bus has been rerouted down a different way. The other thing I'd like to see with technology improvements is the way that companies use like social media and like their websites and things to post information. A lot of times when videos are done, it doesn't include like audio description, or if you're adding an image, it doesn't have that image description. It's all visual. We should be trying to make it more inclusive, like let's add audio description, let's add image description, subtitles, so that everyone can get that same message and not be left behind.
Absolutely. Gee, Cassie, you've spoken about so many important things there. And I just really want to acknowledge that real-time information and safety and lighting are real kind of passion focus areas for me. So glad that you brought them up, because I think we really need to raise more awareness around how important those focus areas are. So I just wanted to ask another question around, implementation of accessibility technology in public transport. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's always, I think, tricky as well to kind of build an evidence base, to understand like what the benefits and impacts are. But I'm just wondering, if you could share, what have you witnessed in terms of some of those significant impacts when this kind of technology is used in the network?
Yeah, we've been doing different demonstration days with, disability organisation and their clients. And with the See Me app, I love hearing the excitement that happens from people, and they go, oh, like this is great. And then you always get that follow-up question, oh, when's this going to be on my bus service? It's like, oh, yeah, I want to get it onto your bus service, but we've got to get through this proof of concept test. And, like we've had a lot of comments about how well the app works with a screen reader, which for me as a developer, I go, yes, and a screen reader user, it's definitely been one of my focus. But it also sort of saddens me that we've still got a long way to go when it comes to apps working well with a screen reader. So often you hear the word image or button. It's like, what does that mean? Whereas like with the See Me app, it clearly states that, like this button is list of pickup stops or whatever it might be. And I think one of the comments that really touched me was from a lady during a demonstration day. And she said, "This is so exciting because it's something that is made for us." The issue of bus hailing has been a problem for a long time, and it hasn't been addressed. And it's great that people are excited, and I hope it, spurs more innovation around public transport and things, and getting more people on board, like, to help improve that service.
PTA ANZ is proud to bring you Season 7 of the Women Who Move Nations public transport podcast in partnership with NEC Australia. With over a century of innovation and a strong commitment to creating a brighter, more inclusive world, NEC is dedicated to gender equality and diverse perspectives and is amplifying the voices of women leaders in public transport. Struggling to hold on to your drivers? Transform your bus operations with NEC's Turn by Turn, the first bus navigation system built to reduce driver onboarding and training significantly. Head to nec.com.au/STS.
I want to talk to you a bit more around, I guess, leadership in this space. And, I've heard you talk about how it's so important to kind of embed that lived experience. And if you could kind of share from your perspective as a leader, like, you're driving some really inspirational work here in this space around technology and accessibility. How do you get people to think about it? Like, how do you foster the innovation within your team at Sage Automation? And if any reflections you might have, around kind of broader industry experience as well. But I'd love to hear about how you encourage that innovation.
Yeah, so in the team, I am known for not holding back when something doesn't work through accessibility. And I provide examples of why it doesn't work. And, like, I might demonstrate, like, with the screen reader, to go, like, this is what I'm hearing, so it might be constantly hearing, like, image, 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 or button. And I turn off the screen so that they can't see it visually. So they can only see black. So they have to actually, like, hear, what it is that's being said. And I think that really just helps demonstrate, like, what that pain point is, because when you haven't got that lived experience, you don't know what you don't know, right? So by demonstrating it and going, okay, well, if this is what you're hearing, like, how are you meant to interact with that application or website or whatever it might be? But it's also about, like, having open conversation and sharing stories of what happens, because that can help fuel innovation as well. And it gets people thinking, and then you just never know where, like, an idea might come from. You're talking about the bus hailing. That came from an experience of frustration and thinking about, well, there's got to be a better way to do that. And sometimes you've got to show that, like, I guess, a bit of vulnerability there of situations that are happening, which can help drive change, because people don't know that, like, that's a pain point, and that you can't see that button that's there, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's good to hear, and I can just see, again and again, this importance of the lived experience, but focusing on the user experience and really encouraging people to really think about that, in a different way that we have in the past. I think that's, the reality of, how our industry is evolving. So I'm just thinking through, so, there's new technology that, you're piloting, that you're rolling out. And I mean, I know that for transport authorities and for transport operators, one of the big challenges is all of these different legacy systems, that exist from a tech perspective. And so integration can be a real challenge, both kind of technically, but cost, often it's bespoke. So I wanted to ask you, how do you approach that challenge of integrating new technologies, like, into the existing public transport systems?
Yeah, so we're going with an open approach, because we know that you need to bring everyone along for the ride. As you say, there's so many different systems out there, and it could be cost prohibitive to then want to put, like, another device. It's like, how many devices do you put on? And they all start to overlap. And, so what we've been creating is a open specification for, like, onboard device vendors to to get like the CME service integrated into that. So it's another, I guess, addition to like their hardware. It provides more opportunity for people to be able to hail a bus, but you've also got to have that like open approach and bring the drivers and the passengers along for the ride and get their input and feedback, because you don't know what everyone's, like all the different organizations' pain points are and what barriers that will prohibit that. And you can chuck new technology onto a vehicle, but if you haven't got that driver buy-in, well, they may just ignore it, or they might pull out cables or whatever it might be. So you've really got to get everyone on board with the benefits and the impact that the technology can have. And just, getting that message out there, talking to people, it all helps with that.
I'm just thinking through, Cassie, my next question is really around leadership, and, particularly if you could share, like, what are the leadership lessons, that you've learned through this journey, as a professional working in a high-tech environment?
I think the biggest thing would be, don't be afraid to speak up and share stories, show a bit of vulnerability, because, like I said before, people don't know what they don't know. And until you can show and share those experiences, it brings people on board, and they can get a better understanding. To do a recording of the screen reader chatting away, people don't know what it sounds like until you give them that experience. One of the things that I like to do if I'm presenting about ways to make things more inclusive, I do a screen recording of the screen reader, but I have it talking at the rate that I normally hear it at. So, which is quite quick. I increase the speed because you get used to like the speed that the screen reader talks. So when I play it, it's just like and you go, oh, did anyone catch what it said? And you get that general feeling from the group. It's like, what just happened then? And then you slow it down, the speech rate, and then people can hear, it's constantly saying image, button, hashtags are being read incorrectly because it hasn't got camel case, that sort of thing. Like I try to, when I'm talking about like the CME application, I've got images that are really blurry, and I go, oh, this is what it looks like if you're standing at a bus stop. And people go, oh, like I didn't even know that you were at a bus stop based on that picture. So it just helps with trying to feel that experience and get people to get a bit more of an understanding of what it can be like.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're sharing this and, really putting these issues, in this forum. We have so many listeners now for everyone to think about. So thank you, Cassie. I want to move on and talk about women in transport, women in mobility. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, right, I actually read a report the other day from Australian Bureau of Statistics, and the proportion of our population for people with disabilities who are employed in work is absolutely shocking. It's so low. And, and I really kind of thought about that actually in terms of, how can we support everyone to be employed? And from your experience, what have you seen the barriers to be for women, and especially with disabilities, when they're working in this industry, when they're working in tech, when they're working in public transport? But I'm sure actually, some of those challenges, apply broadly as well.
Yeah, I mean, the rate of people with disabilities in the workforce, we really need to improve that. Unfortunately, I think there's still that fear around employing people with disability. Is it going to be more challenging? Is it, what? I don't know what fears people have, and I think this is where I want to challenge people to, I guess, think about, well, what is holding you back from potentially employing someone with a disability? If you've got questions, ask the person, or if you've got, concerns, ask the person. Don't make assumptions that it can't happen. I've had friends, have done job interviews, and the person who's blind is interviewing the person about the job because the person doing the interview has got stuck on, well, how are you going to answer the phone? And it's like, well, I'm just, like, I'm going to pick it up and answer it. Or, like, I've got a screen reader. I can hear if the phone is ringing and I will answer it. But they get stuck on, oh, but you're blind, so you can't do this, or you can't do that. It's like, well, I can actually. I have assistive technology to help me do that job. And we have things like job access and things that if there is a modification that needs to happen in the workplace, they fund that to make it happen so that, you as an employee can actually work in the workplace just as well as anyone else that's able-bodied. But we've still got this, real big fear of the unknown. And it's like, well, but what if you took them on? It could be the greatest thing you've done because it brings a different perspective and that sort of thing. I really hope it changes. But we're also in a male-dominated industry as well. So, as females, there's still that sexual harassment and that bullying that can happen. And there's times we go, oh, geez, do I really want to continue doing this? But I think when you're passionate, you find a way and push through it. But yeah, I just hope that people's judgments, do change in time sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it to change either, Cassie. As you shared, the different challenges, and some of those affect us all, right? And the harassment and bullying, it still exists. So let's hope that it's on the path to change. So I've just got a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. And I think my next one, you've covered actually a lot in terms of how you foster that information, how you break down those barriers. But is there anything else that you'd like to share around how you advocate for more inclusive practices in our sector?
Yeah, I think it's talking to people. It's doing things like podcasts, going to conferences, providing examples to help illustrate the issue. A lot of people hadn't even considered, that hailing a bus would be a challenge for people with vision impairment until it started getting talked about and shared. The great thing about social media is you can share that experience and you never know where it may lead to. Yeah, people with the See Me app was like, oh, I hadn't even thought that, you wouldn't know what bus was coming up or that you couldn't read the bus number or know where to get off. So yeah, I think it's just all about sharing and trying to make connections with people because you never know where it may lead to as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so I'm on the last question. It's the question that I always finish on. What advice could you give to women who are entering these fields, into public transport, into technology, looking at accessibility solutions? What's the advice that you have or the insights you could share?
I think, don't be afraid to ask. It's always a no until you ask. Now, it could still be a no after you've asked, but at least you've asked, you've given it a shot. Whereas if you never take that shot, well, it's always going to be a no. You can't get into somewhere unless you put yourself out there. Attend conferences, go to presentations, talk to people, ask questions, because again, you never know where it might take you. So for example, for me, I got into SAGE. I attended a driverless vehicle summit and started a conversation there. And that's what, eventually led to me joining the team. It doesn't always have to necessarily be like that applying for a job that's online or whatever. There's so many different ways that we can get into a company through connections, join social media groups of places or that you're interested in. I'm part of a lot of different accessibility groups on social media. And, you learn new things, you can provide feedback to others, it just helps with that experience and information. And I think trust in yourself and your abilities, have a motto or something that helps you feel confident going into a conversation, into an interview. For me, I've got a bracelet that says I've got this. And I always come back to that whenever something's tough or I'm nervous about something, I've got this, I can do this, do the superhero pose, stand tall. Yeah, you've got this. Just give it a chance. And yeah, like I said, if you don't ask, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Cassie, I really love that. I want one of these bracelets. I've got this, right? How important is it, the superhero pose? And I actually really appreciate what you're sharing. It's almost like a little mantra because I've got one, I am enough. And I always pull that out and write it on my notebook when I need to. Cassie, we're at the end of our questions. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing so openly. It's a real privilege to profile you and to have interviewed you as a guest today. The leadership that you're showing for our sector in technology and accessibility in public transport is really, really inspiring, right? Because you're driving equity, but also equitable access to our public transport system. So I just want to say thank you and absolutely good luck as you continue your career journey.
Thank you so much for having me on the show and for letting me share a part of my story.
That's the end of our episode of Women Who Move Nations. I'm your host, Michelle Batsis, and I look forward to sharing with you next time.
Thank you for listening to Women Who Move Nations, the public transport podcast. We're proud to deliver this episode in partnership with NEC Smart Transport Solutions. To find out more, visit nec.com.au. This series is produced by Jamie Leowen and Sophia Dickinson for the Public Transport Association Australia, New Zealand. To find out more, please visit our website ptaanz.org. Tune in for more soon.